So I've owned my 71 Chevy Nova for 8 years now, almost eight and a half. And it's actually my fourth classic car. I've owned a few other cars from 70s and 60s as well. But one common thing between all of them is that I've never really gotten to just kind of enjoy them as an old car. And I know that kind of sounds weird. What I mean by that is, for instance, the Nova is a complete race car, right? It's gutted, it's got a full cage, it's got a fuel cell, it's got all sorts of, you know, rattles, and it's hot. There's no insulation. It is a race car. The other cars that I had were either just not in very good condition, modified, not very, practical to drive around, that sort of thing. So I never really got to enjoy something that was just a simple stock, actually, just regular old car. And recently, I started a new job where my commute is insanely short. It's only 2 miles away. And I find myself kind of with more flexibility with what I need out of a daily driver. And I got the idea that if I could find something that is solid enough for cheap enough that I wouldn't have to do too much work to, I'm okay with doing a little bit of work, of course. I do work on cars all the time. But I really wanted to get something that I could enjoy, and just kind of have that classic car experience that I've always really missed. And here it is. This is my new to me 1972 Pontiac Ventura. Now, if it looks familiar, that's because it is. These cars are both on the GM X body chassis, which is their compact, compact. Back in the day, that was considered compact. It was smaller than the Chevelle, which was on the A body chassis, and they basically shared, suspension parts, a lot of engines and such. The Ventura came a little bit later in the X bodies, the third gen life for the chassis, because earlier in the Ventura's name actually comes from a more full-size car. So this is considered a Ventura 2, kind of like how the Nova used to be known as the Chevy 2, and a lot of people still refer to them like that. That actually stopped in the late 60s, and after that they were known as just the Chevrolet Nova. The Nova used to be a trim level on the Chevy 2, because originally, back in the day, Chevy just had the Chevy, and then they came out with a new model, and they went, well, we need more names, so let's make it a Chevy 2, that sort of thing. But for the Ventura, it actually moved from a bigger chassis to a smaller chassis, and they were like, well, it's technically a totally different car. It's not just an evolution of the same car for the new year, that sort of thing. So they called it the Ventura 2. Most people just call it a Ventura, of course, but underneath, it's basically a Nova. This is a pretty decent example of one. I got this car cheap, so don't expect much. This is basically a base model drivetrain. This is a 250 cubic inch inline six push rod, the typical Chevy straight six engine, and it's got a two-speed power glide auto, and kind of what you see is what you get. The car was repainted at one point. It does have obviously some flaws in the paint here and there, but it's otherwise actually pretty solid. I'm gonna do a bit more walk around as we go here, because this is basically the car as I got it. It was actually basically abandoned when somebody got evicted. They left this car and some other vehicles and stuff, and eventually they got towed from that place, and this car was put up for sale, and I picked it up from the tow yard and made sure it ran and that sort of thing. But it's pretty sweet. Let me grab the key real quick. Now, as you can see, there's plenty of chips and dings and such. It kind of looks like this car was resprayed maybe a little while back. I don't think it was originally red. And as you can see, things that probably should have been masked off. It's a quick respray job. It's not a big deal. Like I said, I got this car for cheap. And it's kind of funny, though, because it already kind of is more solid than a lot of other classics, like I said. Like I also said, this car was basically abandoned, so there's some stuff in the car. It basically looks like somebody was daily driving it for a while, and then when it was abandoned, it sat. But luckily, the tags are actually only expired in 2021, so it's probably only been a couple years that it's been sitting around. But, things like the dash pad, Yeah, it's pretty typical for these old things to crack, but I'll probably get a cover like I have on the Nova. I kind of like that. It's just basically a carpet piece that sits on top. Um, but you may have seen the cassettes here, and it's funny with cars like this where they're just basically like a time capsule. There's some weird kind of like audio stuff going on here. Yes, there's a CB radio in here, which I have zero use for, so that's going to come out. Actually, when I first saw the car in the pictures, there was a CB antenna on the trunk, and I was worried that it was actually drilled through the trunk and I would have to, you know, plug the hole and everything. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here, but luckily it's just a magnet, and that popped right off, and you know, there's no holes to fill in the trunk, so that's cool. You know, there's obviously a lot of cleaning and such that needs to be done here. Yes, that is some brake hardware from the front. That's another thing that I got to do, and that'll be one of the first things. But otherwise, just, you know, things that I got to check from a car that's been sitting for a couple years. Things like hoses and belts, that sort of thing. Check the fuel lines, probably blow them out. I might need to rinse the tank out. We'll have to see. But like I said, this car is actually pretty solid. Not really sure what all these chips are from. Maybe it was sitting next to somewhere and, you know, something was hitting up against her, people walking by, that sort of thing. Who knows? But the seats in the car actually look like they've probably been redone at some point, and the headliner is actually pretty mint. I've never had a car this old with this nice of a headliner. Just need a little dome light lens on it, but this thing is actually pretty solid. Not really sure how that happens. Maybe somebody got mad or something, but luckily I do actually still have the original cluster from the Nova. I'm gonna see if maybe I can transfer the lens piece, but you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. And we've got our little stereo unit here. I want to see if that actually works. It would be kind of neat if I could get it to work. Obviously there's no faceplate on it, but it could be around here somewhere. There's, you know, that's how you know this car is from back in the day, but you know, it's really kind of charming, honestly. It's nothing that's like alarming though. There are a few spots on the car, like right here. Obviously, that's not ideal, but as far as I know, this rust spot doesn't extend any further than that. The quarters, roof, and, you know, the rockers otherwise seem solid. There does seem to be, you know, like this with this dent here. You can tell, yes, there's a skim coat of body filler here, but it doesn't seem thick or anything like that. And this car did come from Wisconsin originally at some point. I don't know how long they were here because they have this older looking bumper sticker that says, you know, San Diego's Frontier Town here. So again, not really sure how long it's been out here, but you know, old cars, they get a little rusty here and there, but it's nothing alarming. And honestly, it doesn't need to be perfect. This is not a show car. This is going to be, like I said, a street car, a daily. I don't need anything crazy. You know, there's little things that I would like to kind of improve a little bit here and there. Like, it looks like somebody, basically it looks like the interior on this car was originally green, which is funny because that's the color the Nova was originally, but I think the interior was black. But it looks like this car actually had a green interior, and somebody kind of spray painted over some stuff here and there. So things like the door panels are showing, you know, like green paint underneath it. These door pads definitely have green underneath them. It'd be nice to see if maybe I can scuff these and reshoot this with some better trim paint. I've seen people do that with some decent results. Or maybe I could find somebody that has some good quality door panels, but honestly the door panels are pretty solid. They're not like falling apart or anything like that. And the windows, the door locks work beautifully, actually. They go up and down better than the Novas. Little things like, unfortunately, this latch is broken here for the quarter window, and somebody kind of put a little screw just to hold it closed. The other one does work, so that's good. And we need some new door seals, just because, you know, these are original. They're just falling apart. That's nothing crazy, though. That's pretty easy to do. And even with the bad door seals, door closes awesome. Opens and closes. It feels really good. The strikers line up well, that sort of thing. When I got the car, I did rinse it off, and I did discover, you know, just like, again, on the Nova. And this is nice because this is a chassis that I'm familiar with. I've basically touched almost every bolt on this car except for the rear bumper, the trunk, and like the rear leaf springs. Literally everything else I've had apart. I've had the whole front end apart, including the body panels, the suspension, a lot of stuff on the interior, that sort of thing. So I kind of know what I'm looking at when it comes to this car. There are some things that I'm not as familiar with. For instance, my car never had inner fenders, so kind of working around those. Hopefully I don't really need to mess with those or anything. Case in point, the battery tray, actually. This is from the Nova because I did the relocation on the battery. This is what the Ventura's battery tray was like. And some people might look at this and be like, oh my God, that car is just probably rotting apart as it sits. And like I said, yes, it's a little crusty here and there, just like any old car, but underneath the tray is actually fine. Because the battery acid, even this, you know, from the Nova, which wasn't rotted away or anything like that, it just has a little bit of, you know, damage in the paint from that. Battery acid plus water and stuff over 50 plus years, it's pretty common to see. So I want to do some cleaning up of some of the wiring and stuff like that because, you know, people had added not one, but 2 horns in here. I'm not sure if one is like for an alarm, one is like an aftermarket actual horn or what, but probably both of them are going to have to go. And I do actually want to wire a real horn into this because that's, you know, something I've never actually had in an old car that actually worked. The Nova never had a horn that worked or any wiring or a horn even installed. I don't know what this is, this Sparkomatic NF100. There doesn't appear to be anything on the ignition or anything like that. And although this might look a little alarming, you know, carbine, you know, just things like that. I'm discovering this as I go. I have not actually dove into this car yet since I got it. I've really just kind of been saving it a little bit. Anything interesting in the... Yeah, I got some old cigarettes, but hey, we got a cigarette lighter. You know, things like this. This can go. This little Kleenex holder or whatever it is, that can go. There we go. And you know, this little auxiliary speaker, maybe, or maybe that's the speaker for the CB. Yeah, because it's wired to that. So, you know, all this stuff is gonna go for the CB. Like I said, don't have any use for it, so I'm gonna pull that out. But I kind of like this little console piece here because, you know, these cars don't have cup holders and such. Stock, there would have been like nothing here unless it was a console car. But I believe these are not stock seats. My buddy was also saying they don't look like original seats. I'm having a time figuring out what they are. Old school ashtrays, ashtrays in the seats, ashtrays in the doors, ashtrays in the dash. You know, it's the 70s, right? But they're solid. Like I said, the upholstery and such seems to be redone. The foam and stuff, like sitting in it, it's totally solid. Like this is actually pretty comfy, and it's a good height and stuff, you know. So it doesn't seem that crazy. There's some interesting hardware going on, and I'm going to be pulling these out here to clean everything up in a little bit here. But, you know, I'm thinking probably some new belts because this car does have, you know, in the early 70s, they started doing shoulder belts and such. So I'm probably going to want to get some new reels and such, make them a bit safer. And just old belts do get crusty and they do get less safe. So it's generally smart to do on older cars. There are companies that sell new seat belts and such. But yeah, you know, I'm gonna, you know, gonna take some time, clean this thing out, see what I can find hiding in the nether regions and that sort of thing. I've already seen some, you know, goodies here and there, but that's okay. We're prepared for that. And yeah, I'm probably gonna pull this rear carpet. Not sure if it's gonna go back in because it doesn't look very good, but I can get rear carpet kits, that sort of thing, and it can also will allow me to see what I'm dealing with in the floor, that sort of thing. It looks pretty solid, but I haven't seen underneath it, that sort of thing. Um, and little things like the glass around here leaks just a little bit, but it did that on the Nova as well. I was able to seal it up pretty easily. But yeah, so I am excited to jump into this thing and just get it going just as is. Make sure the tires are good. Actually, the tires look pretty good. I don't think they're that old. Gonna make sure things like the steering works, the brakes work, and the fuel system, and there's no issues with the electrical. Other than that, it's a classic car. It's pretty simple. People, sometimes they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna try to daily drive an old car?" It's like, well, I mean, even my wife's car is 15 years old now. My Fiesta is actually 9 years old now. That's kind of old. That's kind of getting there, and these cars were originally built and designed to be daily drivers anyways. So as long as they're in, good condition, and there's less actually to go wrong in older cars. There's less luxuries and that sort of thing, yes. Like, this isn't something you're going to have cruise control and Bluetooth and all that, but you can add it in. We'll see where it takes me in terms of, ultimate plans. I would really, really like to maybe do a super budget and simple LS swap into this. I've already actually been talking to some people about some options to really keep it budget friendly, because you can still do that these days. You can still do budget LS swaps, and actually I think it's gotten cheaper, and that's something that I never was able to do with the Nova. There's a long story there about why that never happened, but I'm kind of glad that it never happened. I'm not glad about how it never happened, but in the long term, I am really happy that I was able to make the JZ swap happen on that car. But that is like a big kind of pipe dream build, sort of an ideal swap that, people talk about, but I was actually able to get it to work. This car, I want affordable. I want more bolt-in. I don't want to be messing with a whole lot of stuff. It's not going to be super fancy. I'm not going to be, taking this to the racetrack regularly. I mean, maybe later on, if like it has a more powerful engine that's like could be fun to maybe take it to the strip or something like that, just to see what it'll do. But it's not a priority. I mainly want to be able to cruise this thing around, and hopefully I keep it long enough to where I can cruise my kids around in it, that sort of thing. When that time comes, that's one thing that I really, really would like to be able to share with people. Really, is that my parents grew up with older cars. Some of their first cars were 70s or 60s cars, but ever since then, people don't see classic cars every day, and it's bizarre when I'm driving the Nova, people see me, somebody that looks young driving in this old car, especially like a race car setup like that, and they just like, what? Like, young person's driving an old car that's probably 2-3 times his age? Is like, yeah, because I really like them. I think they're amazing, and I like to keep things like this alive. I feel like the cars are from a time where we really valued things in a different way, arguably in a better way. Things were better in some ways back then, and I just kind of like to keep some of that energy alive. So, join me as we start this next new journey. Don't worry, the Nova is not going to get neglected. I got some small bits here and there coming for it, just to improve little things. But this is going to be kind of the next focus on the channel, because the next steps on the Nova, for bigger things like power steering, that sort of thing, going to take more planning, more funds, and that sort of thing, and I really got to plan it out. But as it sits, it's actually pretty solid. So check it out. Next time we'll hopefully be doing the brakes and getting this thing fired up again and give it a new lease on life.